Hello and welcome to Into the Woods with Holly Wharton. This podcast is all about our journey into the woods of ourselves, getting to know who we are, where we are, and where we're going in life, so that we can create the life that we want to live. It's about deepening your connection with yourself, taking inspired action, and really trusting yourself and your intuition. It's also about mindset. Our beliefs are such an important part of this journey, and there are so many ways for us to change our mindset so that we can more easily live a life of expansive joy. This podcast is also about going literally into the woods and spending time in nature, and how that can help us on our own personal journey of self-knowledge. Thank you so much for joining us today. Now let's get into this week's episode. Hello, adventurers, and welcome to the Into the Woods podcast, episode 427. This is your host, Holly Wharton, and I'm back with another exciting guest. Today, I will be talking about child-free living and adventures in Childfreedom with Isabel Firecracker. So, back in 2019, I was a guest on her podcast, which is called the Honest Uproar. I really enjoyed our conversation, and I've been wanting to get her on my show for a while. I'm very much aware that I wouldn't have the time to do all the things I've been doing, like training for ultras, if I had children. I'm very grateful for my child-free lifestyle, but it was really hard to get here. Like many of Isabel's clients, I didn't realize that child-free living was actually an option in life. And I know that sounds silly, but it's not something that we talk about that much. So you, listener, may or may not be child-free. I have many friends who are, and I know that some of my podcast listeners are as well. Child freedom is not about disliking children or being angry at parents, because everyone's lifestyle choices are valid. But it's important for me to have these conversations because I hope to save other people some of the confusion that I had when I was growing up. So if you get just one thing out of this episode, I hope it's this, that having children is a choice. It's not an obligation. It's not the default lifestyle. You can do it or you cannot do it. So, who is Isabel Firecracker? Isabel was born and raised in Colombia and has called 5 countries home in her 30-something years. A world traveler, avid kite surfer, and child-free intersectional feminist, Isabel is a pragmatic, no-nonsense coach for child-free women who struggle with feelings of insecurity, shame, guilt, or anger that surround their choice to not have children. She has designed her coaching program specifically for this end, to help child-free women evolve and grow into the best version of themselves. Isabel is co-host of Childfree Girls, a podcast and web series that features 3 women in 3 different countries who challenge society's expectations of parenthood with no-holds-barred conversations and interviews. Isabel is also the host of the Honest Uproar podcast, a space for child-free women to gather and tell their #childfree stories. It was created to foster a stronger sense of community and to connect empowered women around the world. More recently, Isabel co-founded Nunca Madres. This community features child-free content in Spanish to raise awareness about how parenthood is a choice and not an obligation amongst the Spanish-speaking population. So you can find more about Isabel on her website, therisingspark.com, and her podcast, The Honest Uproar. You can be found at theuprisingsspark.com/childfree-podcast, and I'll link to that in the show notes. So what are you going to learn today? We talk about Isabel's adventures in solo travel and kite surfing. I've never done kite surfing, but when I lived in Argentina, I lived by this lake where there was a kite surfing school, and so I used to watch all the kite surfers from my window every day, and I loved watching them. And I was always curious to try, but I never did. So it was really, really interesting to hear more about kite surfing and what it's like to travel to go kite surfing. So we also talk about what it means to be child-free, how the child-free lifestyle helped Isabel to live an adventure-filled life, the life-changing aha moment that Isabel had when she realized she was child-free, the common insecurities and limiting beliefs that child-free women tend to experience, and finally, how child-free women can learn to embrace their lifestyle choice, because again, this is a choice. So, I will move on to this week's episode. Hope you enjoy it. Hello, how are you doing today?
I'm well. How are you, Holly?
Good. I'm really looking forward to talking about child-free living with you.
Same.
So, you're really into traveling and kite surfing. How did you get into that?
Well, that's going to be a 2-part sort of answer. Traveling, it's always been one of the things that have it's been one of my passions, I think, forever. I started traveling very, very young.
Mm.
My parents were travelers as well. They still are. So I got to see a lot of the world when I was a child. And that sort of sparked this something inside me that I'm just really curious about other cultures and just meeting people from around the world. I love going to different countries and like tasting the local food and getting to see a little bit about their customs. And it's something that I've always been like very motivated and passionate about.
Mm-hmm.
And one of my things in my bucket list actually is to travel to every single country in the world.
Ooh.
So hopefully I'll be able to do that before my time on this earth ends. I'm good in my list. I think I need to do like maybe 2 or 3 countries per year.
Oh, nice.
Which is something that I'm striving to do. Yeah, totally.
So what are some of your favorite
that's
countries?
Traveling. Oh, that's hard because I think every country has like a special something. Recently, I was in Egypt.
Ooh.
And it was such an amazing thing to get to see all this part of this ancient culture that you hear about so much, especially in my case, when I was a child. I used to read a lot of Egyptian mythology, basically. So I got one of those books and like reading about all these gods, and just going to see there and seeing like the tombs and the pyramids and like everything like up close is just surreal. Honestly, it was a surreal experience. So that was for like in that part, in the sense of like the culture, it was just amazing. I love Greece. The food is amazing, and the ocean and the people, it's just beautiful. I also love Brazil. I think the culture of Brazil is amazing. I mean, it's just, I think I don't have like a favorite country. I think it's just
there's good things about everything. And where in the world are you based?
I'm in Colombia.
Nice. It's one place I've never been.
Oh, it's beautiful.
I've only heard good things about the nature and the everything. It just sounds amazing. So do you travel alone or do you travel with people?
I usually travel alone because I like to do things at my own pace. Sometimes I do travel with people. Like, for example, if I'm in a relationship, I might travel with my partner. I travel with friends sometimes. And for example, with kite surfing, which is something that you also mentioned at the beginning of our conversation, I got into kite surfing in 2017. So it's been 4 years. And that's also one of the excuses, sort of like quote unquote excuse to travel, like just traveling to like different parts of the world to like kite surf. So for example, I did kite surfing when I was in Egypt. I was in the Red Sea. So, for example, for that specific trip, a part of the trip I was alone when I was exploring Cairo and when I was exploring Luxor. But when I was in the Red Sea, I was with a group of kite surfers. So I guess it depends what the destination is and what kind of thing I'm doing. I usually do not travel alone for kite surfing. You always need to be like within a group,
right? Because
it's safer.
Yeah.
I like both, but honestly, traveling alone has, I think in my case personally, I think a lot more perks.
Yeah.
Because you get to do things at your own pace.
Yes.
You get to manage your time. You get to, if you're really tired one day and you're like, I really cannot like go out and walk, I just you can stay in the hotel.
Yeah.
Just relax. Full, it's, so you don't have to like, when you're with people, you have like this agenda of things. You have to do stuff. So I guess I prefer traveling alone. Yeah.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I've always really, really enjoyed traveling alone just because, like you said, I can do what I want, when I want, how I want, where I want. I can take a rest. I can be active. I can do whatever. So it's really nice.
Exactly. That's how I feel about it. Yeah.
So how did you get started with kite surfing?
It was after a breakup, actually.
Wow.
Yeah, like I was in a long-term relationship, and we broke up. And I had been wanting to do kite surfing for a while, but I didn't actually I wasn't motivated enough to go and learn, because where I live, in order for you to learn, you have to travel 2 hours by car. And so I was like, I don't want to do that trip alone. And my ex-partner, he wasn't into it at all. So after we broke up, I was like, okay, I need to do something. You know how you find yourself with more time in your hands after a relationship?
Yeah.
I used to spend all this time with this person, but now I don't have to spend that time with this person. Therefore, there's a lot of time that I need to do something about it. And I've always been very curious about learning new things and just experimenting. And so I was talking to a friend, and I was like, I really want to learn how to kite surf. And she was like, oh, me too. Let's do it together. And so we started going together up to the lake and learning together. So I think that was the motivation that I needed, just having more time and just having somebody to be with me, at least at the beginning.
Yeah.
And I totally fell in love with it because to me, it's sort of like you're by yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's not sports. It's not a team sports.
Yeah.
It's you and your kite. And of course you have to mind the elements and you have to be aware of your surroundings. But at the same time, it's sort of like you get so immersed in being with the water and being with nature and just feeling the wind, just feeling the kite as well. The kite becomes sort of like a part of you when you're kite surfing. And at some point, it's really unconscious when you start moving it. You kind of like learn how to feel it.
Mm-hmm.
It's sort of like, in a way, it's like meditating.
Yeah.
And I love it. And just the water. I mean, I love the water. I love the ocean. For me, it's just like the best thing.
I imagine you've got to be really present. You can't like get distracted and think about other things and
Exactly. That's the thing. And then when you're very present, you tend to really take in everything that's around you.
Yeah.
One of my favorite things that has happened to me when I was kite surfing. So usually when it rains, the wind just like stops in the lake. So I was kite surfing and then it started raining really hard. So the wind stopped, like all the kites went down on the water. We're just waiting there until we get rescued by a boat. And it's fine. I mean, you have your neoprene, you're floating in the water. It's okay. You're just waiting for somebody to pick you up. And I just started looking at the water and seeing all the drops of rain were coming down in the water and they were forming like little white balls. And it was like I was surrounding just by all this. It was just beautiful. It was like pearls around me. And I was like, don't even pick me up.
I'll stay here.
Yeah.
It sounds really peaceful.
Totally. Yeah.
So kite surfing, that requires a lot of like upper body strength, doesn't it?
No, it's more about the legs and the core.
Oh, really? Okay.
Because you're being pulled by the kite.
Right.
Your harness, and your harness is on you have it around your waist.
Okay.
So you need core strength, and then the legs because you need to be able to steer the board. The arms are only to like guide the kite. You don't really have to use force in the arms. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. I always imagined it was different. So what was that like physically? Like developing that core strength and leg strength and the balance, I guess. You need to be fairly kind of have a sense of like, what was that like physically, kind of adapting your body to participate in the sport?
Well, it's different for everyone, but to me, it was very challenging at the beginning because there are two stages when you're learning that are really frustrating. The first one is when you're starting to get up on the board. Mm-hmm. And that's when you need a lot of balance. That's just a lot of learning where the center of gravity is in your body. And you need to also have a lot of like strength in your legs to be able to pull yourself up because you can't pull yourself up with the kite. So that was very challenging. And the second part that is really frustrating for most kite surfers is when you're learning to go upwind because you need to be able to steer the board and to put your body in a position that is not really a natural position. Mm-hmm. That's when you need to use a lot of your core to actually be able to turn your body and at the same time. And then your legs are also in a certain position. So it's just like, I mean, I think for people who have practiced sports like, I don't know, maybe gymnastics or ballet, it's a lot easier than it's for people. I was doing CrossFit at the time, so I was heavy.
Yeah, you were in good shape.
I was in good shape, but I was heavy, so it was challenging. Those are like the two biggest hurdles. After you go up to the second, then that's it. That's it. You just need to practice after that.
So what have you learned about yourself through kite surfing?
First of all, I think just trying something new. It was a little bit scary at the beginning.
Yeah.
It's a high risk sport. So you need to really be like present and whatnot. Like it was risky. So I was like, I want to do this, but I'm a little bit scared. And I think just learning to embrace that, being a little bit apprehensive about something because that turns into something really good.
Yeah.
That was one thing. And also the being present part that we, spoke about earlier, because I think I'm always thinking about either the past or the future a lot. I'm always like in the future and trying like being like you really have to be in the moment. And that's always been something that has been challenging for me in general.
Yeah.
I don't do a lot of meditation because I usually get very distracted. So when I'm kite surfing, I really get to that point when I'm like just feeling myself in my body and just being one with nature, which is something that I have never experienced before with any other sport.
And I imagine you really are at the mercy of nature because you're dependent on the wind, but you're also in the water. Like, you really have to have a really kind of deep awareness of what's going on with the changing weather conditions and the water conditions. And what's that like? Have you ever had any kind of challenging moments out there?
Oh, definitely. I've swallowed more water
than
I can even tell you about. I've had, falls and just like, especially when you're starting to learn how to do tricks. But because you have to be very aware of it's really everything around you. It's the wind, it's the water, it's the heat, because the heat also changes sort of like how your kite responds. And also, like just recently when I was in the Red Sea kite surfing, we're in a part where there were a lot of like coral reefs. So you really have to be careful where you're going. And sometimes you can't see it. Like sometimes you don't know what the difference is between seaweed and coral because you don't know the area. Like if you're kite surfing there for the first time. And I actually had a really nasty fall when I was there because I was just like kite surfing and somebody was in front of me and they stopped. And the reason they stopped was because they saw there was a coral reef and I didn't see it. And all I could think of was I don't want to like crash against this person. So I sort of went around them. But when that happened, I just crashed against the coral reef. It was horrible.
Oh, no.
Thankfully, nothing really bad happened to me, but you really have to be very aware of where you are, what you're doing. Yeah.
So when you're out with a group of people, like how many people are in the group? Is it just like a couple of people or are there like 5 or 6 or more?
It depends. You know, when I go up to the lake, usually I'm not in a group per se. Like I go to the school where I learned. So there's a lot of kite surfers who go there. And the good thing about going to the school and kite surfing from there is that you have like the rescue support in case something happens. They're always like watching out for you. So that's good. You're not really in a group. You're like kite surfing, but you're part of like this community, to put it in a way. But when I travel, I don't know. It just depends. Sometimes it's just 2 of us. But the last time I traveled for kite surfing in the Red Sea, there were 30 of us.
Wow.
So yeah, we were all in this huge yacht and it was just an amazing experience. I only knew one person before I went to that yacht. One person out of the 30. So it was an amazing experience of also learning to be in a community of kiters, knowing new people, and we were all watching out for each other. This is one of the things that I love about the sport, and the community is very tight. There's a lot of camaraderie in a way. Like people are always like taking care of each other. We're watching out for each other. So, you know, you never feel alone. And people are usually very, very nice too.
I find that in a lot of like outdoor sports, like trail running and that kind of thing. It's like, I don't know if it's because you are kind of exposed to the elements and you have that kind of element of risk from nature. Or maybe not, but I feel that in situations like that, people are really supportive to each other, really helpful because there is an element of risk involved.
Yeah, I agree. But at the same time, you know, for kite surfing, for example, there is not an element of competitiveness.
That's nice.
You're not competing with someone when you're kite surfing. Yeah, people do it because you feel it's nice to do it. And some people are like in a higher level in terms that they can do like more riskier tricks or more tricks or whatever. But you're not competing.
Yeah.
I feel that, for example, when you, like you mentioned, you know, trail running or whatnot, I've never done it myself, but the people are competing in a way, right? Like who's the fastest, who gets there first.
Yeah, there's a winner.
Here there isn't. So I think that because there isn't that element of being competitive, that element is completely taken out of the equation. That makes the experience of kite surfing a lot different than anything that I have experienced before.
Yeah, that makes sense. So you've mentioned a couple of times doing tricks on the kite. What kinds of things can you do? Like, what does that mean to do tricks?
Oh, it's jumps, doing barrel rolls, doing...
Wow.
Just, you know, there's so many tricks. It's usually jumping. And then when you're up in the air, you can like, I don't know, turn or... I mean, some of them are extremely challenging. And if you actually look at the community as a whole, most people who do like the riskier tricks are men.
Surprise.
There's like a biological reason. Yeah. I think there's a biological reason for that, actually. I've actually been learning, I've been jumping already. I've been learning how to do some very simple tricks. There's something about the riskier tricks that I would love to be able to do them, but there's something in me that is just like, no, wait, you don't need to do that. It's okay.
I've always been so fearful of stuff like that. Like I used to snowboard a lot. And I really enjoyed snowboarding, but like I never went into the parks. I never did the tricks. I just did like downhill snowboarding because I was even fearful of like going through trees and stuff like that. I don't know. I have this, like, I want to do the tricks, but like I have this real fear.
Yeah, I totally understand.
I think that's natural. So as I mentioned in the beginning, one of the things that I wanted to talk about with you is the child-free lifestyle. So what does it mean to be child-free?
Well, to be child-free means that you are free of any obligation or any commitment with a child, whether it's biological, adopted, fostered, you name it. And it's a choice, basically. Yes. It's not something that happens to you. People who are child-free have chosen to go down the path of not being responsible for children.
Yeah, I think that's
in a nutshell.
That's an important thing to point out, because I think people who want to have children but are not able to consider themselves to be childless rather than child-free.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
So how has the child-free lifestyle helped you to live a life full of adventure, be it traveling or kite surfing?
You know, I think that having a child just brings a lot of responsibilities. I mean, when you're striving to be a good parent, you want your child to have best of the best, right? You want them to be educated. You want them to be fed, clothed, protected, safe. And that takes a lot of energy. That takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of money. Like there's so many resources that you need to put into that other being in order for them to be able to not only be raised like in a proper way, I would say, but also just to flourish in the world. And I think that because I'm not spending all that time, all that energy, and all that money in a child, because I don't want one, I spend all this energy and money in myself.
Yeah.
And that means that I have a lot more resources to spare for the things that I'm passionate about, which are traveling, kite surfing, among others.
Yeah.
So it was either or for me. And I was having a conversation with somebody recently about my trip to Egypt. And I told them if I had a kid, I would not have been able to go to that trip, actually. And this is something that I thought it was very interesting. Out of the 30 people who were on the boat, there were, I think it was like 6 or 8 women. So it was mostly men. None of the women had children. None of us. By chance or choice. The youngest one was, I think, 30 years old, and the eldest one was almost 50. So it was interesting to see how women who were there were not mothers. And I was telling this person the reason I wouldn't have been able to do that is because it was an expensive trip. I was away for 2 weeks. I couldn't be with a kid in the boat. Like, you can't take kids on the boat. Like, you know what I mean? And like, it's either feed my child and pay for school or go to the trip. You know what I mean? So...
yeah, that makes absolute sense. So have you always known that you were child-free, or did you come to that realization later in life?
Oh, I came really late in life to that realization. I always thought I was going to have children because it was the expected thing. Yeah, like I'm Colombian. I live in Colombia. I've lived in several countries, but this is where I was raised in my culture. And because it's expected of you as a woman, you're expected to have children. And that's something that I grew up with believing this is something that I had to do. So it's like ticking boxes, right? So you go to school, then you find a husband, you get married, you have a child or 2 or 3 or whatever, buy the house, the dog, the car, the picket fence. And then you retire and then you die, basically.
Sounds like fun.
Sounds super boring, to be honest. Yeah, exactly. But I thought I was going to do it. And, you know, this boyfriend that I mentioned right before when we were talking about kite surfing, that we broke up just before I started learning how to kite surf. I was planning on marrying this guy and we were talking about having children. And this was when I was in my early 30s, right? And so I was like, I thought I had to do it. But so thankfully, most women that I know from my social circle, they gotten married when they were in their 20s and they had children in their 20s. When I was in my 20s, I was traveling the world. I was having fun. I was partying. I was not interested in finding a husband or a boyfriend. Like I was just having fun.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I turned 30, I was like, okay, I think now is the time to start thinking about settling, because if I have to have children, then I might as well find myself a husband on this guy. Thankfully, things didn't work out. When I broke up with him, I went to a therapist and I was talking to her and I was like, oh, I'm so mad, just like life in general, because I just broke up with this guy. We had all these plans. And now I have to find a guy again if I want to have children. And like, I don't think I have the time. And it just sounds really boring to me. And she looked at me in the eye and she said, Isabel, you do know you don't have to have kids, right? And that question changed my life.
Wow.
Because I didn't know. I did not know.
Wow.
Honestly, and people are like, how could you not know? I didn't, honestly.
Yeah.
And this happens to a lot of people. Like, you think that it's something that you have to do. And then it's so embedded in your unconscious mind. It's so embedded in the way that you're raised, in your culture, in your atmosphere, in your community. You don't really question it.
Yeah.
And so when she asked me this question, I was like, wait, I don't have to have kids? Is that even an option? Like, are you serious? It took me about a second to make the decision. It was an aha moment for me. Like, there are people who are like more thought out. Some people are like, there's a process for them. No, for me, it was like an aha moment. It was like, oh my God, I can't believe that's a choice. Thank you so much. And that was it for me. I was like, that's not something I want in my life. And I'm okay. I love my life. I'm super happy.
That's why it's so important to talk about this, because I knew from a young age that I didn't want kids. I mean, I'm an only child, and I remember at some point in high school telling my mother that she was never going to have grandchildren, which was probably horrible of me. But then, like, there's a part of me that knew, but then I didn't have any women in my life, older women that didn't have kids. So I really didn't think it was an option. Like, I didn't want them, but I didn't know it was an option to actually not have them. So it was like I went through life thinking I'm this weirdo, like, what's wrong with me? Everyone else wants them. Why don't I want them? And I was just like going back and forth, like, what if I do? But I don't. But like, it was so difficult. I don't know. Because it was like, as you said, it's this thing that's expected of us. I didn't want them, but I didn't know that was a valid life choice. It's so important for us to talk about this so that people know that it's a valid lifestyle choice.
Exactly. And I completely agree with you. I think that bringing awareness to the fact that it's totally valid and okay to choose not to have children, I mean, it's so important because not a lot of people talk about it. And it's funny because we get a lot of pushback, people who are very vocal about this. Mm-hmm. And some of the pushback is either, oh, you must hate kids. I actually love kids. Yeah. And I feel that my friends who have kids, like, I love spending time with them, but I love giving them back to their mother and sisters. So a wild thing, like, that's cool, love the kid, now I can go home and relax. Yeah. So not all of us hate kids. There are some type of people who do really dislike kids, but we can't generalize.
Yeah,
that's one thing. The other thing that we get a lot of pushback with is people saying, don't have a kid, but like, you don't have to tell everyone. Why talk about it? Like, you don't have to talk about it. Nobody needs to know that you don't want to have a kid. And it's like, well, actually, it's not about me telling the world that I don't want to have a child. It's about me telling the world, listen, I don't want to have a child. There's a lot of us in the world who don't want to have kids, and it's totally okay. Yeah. That's what it's about.
Yeah. And I think if by having these conversations, we can help other women and men have that aha moment sooner in life, then I think that can just kind of pave the way for a much smoother life creation process, rather than having that anguish of like, do I, don't I, should I, shouldn't I? I think it just really helps people to kind of get that clarity sooner.
Absolutely. And not only that, I think also, when you find your people, because one thing that happened to me when I actually made the decision, when I had that clarity, was, oh my God, I'm a freak. Mm-hmm. Like everyone else around me wants children and I don't want them. Something must be wrong with me. Mm-hmm. And then I started looking for my community and I learned not only that there are a lot of us, but also there's like so many different ways of people experiencing their child freedom. Mm-hmm. That wasn't validating in the sense that I don't need anyone else and nobody needs to have their own choices validated from the outside world. That's not a thing. Mm-hmm. But it was comforting, I would say. Yeah. To know that there are people out there who are having their best lives without children and that I could do the same thing too. Because I think I was scared that not having children was going to doom me to a life of solitude. And, I'm a woman, I did think about it. But then I realized I'm just being silly because I mean, some mothers love their kids and their kids are their everything.
Yeah.
But it doesn't happen to every mother. I think it's also important to sort of break the myth that every mother is a happy mother.
Yeah.
Because it's not true, unfortunately. And one of the things that I do say to people all the time is I think that child-free people have put in general, I would say in general, child-free people have put a lot more thought into their choice than mothers in general have put into theirs.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that mothers don't think about having children or not, but sometimes it's just an oopsie, right? It's like, oops, I'm pregnant.
Or this is just the life path that exists, the life path.
Exactly.
And so they do it. Yeah, exactly. I agree.
And I had a client once who told me that she's child-free as well, of course. And she has a friend who had, I think it was 3 children after high school. I mean, they were together in high school. Her friend got married very young and she started having children in her early 20s. She had like 3 kids by the time they talked about this. And what happened was that she saw my client posting something about being child-free. And she was like, wait, was that an option? Like, she's a mother of 3. Wow. Like, was that an option? And my friend was like, of course it was. And I'm talking about somebody who lives in the Midwest in the US. So, maybe culturally speaking, it was something that it was like a given as well in her community. And so she was like, my client was like, yeah, I mean, it's definitely a choice. And her friend told her, I wish I'd known this.
Yeah.
Because I have 3 children, but I really think I wasn't meant to be a mom.
Ooh.
So, yeah, that's really sad.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, and I think a lot of people don't realize it's an option. So tell us about the Uprising Spark. How did that start?
Well, the Uprising Spark started because, so I embraced my child-free lifestyle.
Yes.
And then it was a roller coaster of everything, emotions and just things that happened to me after I embraced my child freedom. Because I didn't have any role models.
Yeah.
I didn't have any friends who were child-free. I didn't know anyone who could sort of not guide me, but sort of like answer a lot of my questions. And at the beginning, I was very angry because all I could hear was pushback from the people that I love. So my family were like, you're crazy. Why? Or my mom, why are you going to give me any grandkids? You know, the things that we hear from people. I don't think they were, in a way, they're well-meaning, I guess. Because they're afraid that maybe your life won't be complete without a child, or you're going to grow old and nobody's going to take care of you, and things like that.
Or you'll regret it. I mean, we do kind of have a time limit on this thing.
Yeah, exactly. Or you're going to regret not having children. And so, because I got a lot of like comments like this, and also when I went out looking for a community, I found a lot of spaces that were super toxic. And to me, that was sort of like a period in time when I was very angry about just people telling us that all these bingos that we call bingos in our community. Basically, bingos are all the criticisms that we get because we decide not to parent, including, but not limited to, you're going to regret it. Nobody's going to take care of you when you're old. Having children is the best thing in the world.
You'll never know true love.
You'll never know true love. That's my favorite one. You'll never know true love. Exactly. So there's just a bunch of them. So it was really hard for me. I struggled beginning, and I found myself looking for someone, like somebody to help me, to guide me, to like sort of tell me everything was going to be okay. And I couldn't find anyone at the time in my in the community, in the childhood community. I couldn't find anyone. I couldn't find any coaches or any programs or anything at all. And all I could find was just really toxic spaces. So I had a lot of tools that I had been learning for many years of doing a lot of inner work and just being really in tune with my spirituality. So I started using those. And then I trained as a coach. And when you train as a coach, you're also coached. Like there was a part of which I was being coached by my mentor. So all of that helped me sort of in that transition, right? And then after I came out of it, feeling like the most unapologetic child-free woman in the world, I was like, I need to help other women sort of do this because there isn't anything out there for us. And so that's how the Uprising Spark started. And at the same time, it started with the Honest Uproar, which was the podcast in which I had the pleasure to interview you in one of my episodes. And so it's been almost 3 years now. And what the Uprising Spark is just, that I wanted to create a positive platform, something that was more focused on, this is why being child-free is so cool, instead of, oh, we hate parents and children. That was not my jam at all.
Yeah.
I respect people's decisions, whether they want to be parents or not. That's perfect. You do you. I love children. It's just not my jam. So what I do now is I coach women who are either on the fence. So they're either deciding whether they want to embrace a child-free lifestyle or not. They're in that moment in life when they're thinking about parenthood, if it's something that they really want to do or not. And I also coach child-free women who are in those moments in life in which they're feeling secure or guilty, or they feel shame because of their decision. That's what I do now with the Uprising Spark.
I love it. I needed you like 15 years ago. So on your website, you say something that I love. I'm that child-free badass friend you wanted but didn't know you needed. I needed you 15 years ago. I will work with you to set on fire all the insecurities and to burn all the limiting beliefs to the ground. So what types of insecurities and limiting beliefs do child-free women tend to have? Like, what types of things do women bring to you?
Well, one of the main things is I'm never going to find a partner.
Yeah.
That's one of the really big ones, because when you decide that you don't want to have children and you find yourself in such a prenatalist world, finding a partner who is not only someone who's compatible with you, but also don't want children, it's really challenging. One of the big ones is how to find a partner who's also child-free.
Yeah.
Because you not only have to find somebody who is compatible with you, but somebody who also doesn't want to have children. And we live in such a prenatalist world that most people are looking for partners to have children with. So that's a big one, because I only coach women. They come to me and they're like, oh, I feel like I'm never going to find a partner and I don't want to have children, so I'm going to be alone for the rest of my life. So that's one of the biggest, I would say, insecurities or fears that I hear. Another big one is people who are really being pressured by their families, their close friends, or even their own partner. They also come to me and say, I feel a lot of guilt because I'm not going to have a child and my family is pressuring me. And I also feel angry about it because I don't think that I can communicate in a way in which I can let them know exactly how I feel. And, so I also help them with that. Another one that is very common among my clients is how they feel really ashamed about their choice. So when they're asked if they have children, they're like, not yet, even though they know they don't want them. They're like, no, not yet. Or, yes, I wanted them, but I'm actually infertile and it's not true, for example.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of shame around telling people that they really didn't want to have children, that it was a conscious choice. They feel ashamed of that. So they find other ways to sort of get out of the conversations about children. There's a lot of beliefs that come with being in a prenatalist world that don't help women or people in general, but I would say especially women, sort of express themselves freely about this choice. And it happens in most cultures as well. I think that maybe in some European countries and some parts of the US and Canada, it's super easy because people are like really open and they're like liberal and progressive, and it's fine. You do you, and they love it. And, it's all about just people doing their thing. But in most cultures around the world, it's just really, really hard.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. So how can child-free women learn to embrace their lifestyle choice so that they can live their best life and just really just be authentic?
I think for me, honestly, the big answer in everything that you need to be a lot more authentic, to be unapologetic, to be just living your life in a way that you know that what you're doing is just, it's for you and it's what makes you happy. Everything boils down to self-love.
Yeah.
To me. And so that's something that I think we lack a lot of in general, people in general, right? And learning to love oneself is something that we're not taught as when we're children. We're not given the tools to sort of understand that we are meant to be the priorities in our own lives. And so getting to that point, it's a lot easier said than done.
Yeah.
But I think it's the basis. I mean, it's just a fundamental thing, right? It's just the foundation of everything.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think with self-love comes self-acceptance.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And yeah, just accepting that this is who I am. This is it. I love myself. I accept myself, and it's different. And so what?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's also an element of self-awareness that is
Yes.
also very needed. That's in process. And I think that Childfree people already have that really, like, they have it down, because you have to be very self-aware when you make a decision like that.
Yeah.
That you don't want to have children for whatever reason, because all of us, we have different reasons, and some of us have many reasons, and some other people only have one, but all the reasons are valid.
Yeah.
Right. But that takes a lot of self-awareness to be able to say, I don't want to have children because insert reason here.
Mm-hmm.
And I think many Childfree people don't realize that. That's a very powerful thing that we have done as people, I guess, as a community in general.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell us about Childfree Girls.
Childfree Girls is a project that was born 2 years ago. So I had been creating a lot of content with Operation Spark and just starting. And I met Lenora is one of the Childfree Girls. There's 3 of us. So Kristen, Lenora, and myself. I had met Lenora because I invited her to be a guest in my podcast as well. And I when we talked, I felt that we had like the same values, not really exactly the same, but we shared a lot of values, and we shared also a lot of thoughts about the Childfree community, and we also wanted to raise awareness. And because like I said at the beginning, I just saw a lot of toxic spaces. Now it's a lot different. Like now you can find a lot more accounts that are a lot more centered in our choice, instead of just being criticizing parents and children and whatnot. And she was one of these people who were not in the toxic space, and I wanted to do a collaboration. And so when I met her, I was like, she would be perfect for this. And so I talked to her and I was like, aren't you interested to maybe do? And she was like, oh, I'm totally down. And we invited Kristen, and there was a 4th person who after a week told us, you know what, I'm not ready for this, which is totally fine.
Yeah.
And so at the end, it was just Lenora, Kristen, and myself. We started this project together. So Childfree Girls is actually a web series and a podcast. So you can actually watch it on YouTube or listen to it on any podcast platform. And we discuss topics that are related to the Childfree lifestyle. Sometimes we bring in guests as well. Not necessarily Childfree, like we've had parents in our show. We've also had a Christian pro-abortionist guy who came to our show. Like we like to talk about these subjects that are usually there isn't a consensus about. And we all have, like, sometimes we have similar points of view, sometimes we don't. But for us, it's about creating a space for the conversation to sort of flourish. So that's what we've been doing for 2 years now with Childfree Girls. Yeah.
Wow. So where can people find you online and learn more about what you do?
Well, they can go to my website, which is theoperationspark.com. They can also find me on social media. I'm most active on Instagram. Instagram at The Operation Spark. And then the Honest Uproar podcast, you can find it in any platform. I mean, I actually decided to end the podcast. And it's funny because I was like, I'm going to end it in episode 100. And episode 100 hasn't even been recorded, because that's going to be me sort of like closing the podcast. I wanted to do different projects, so I needed some time. Yeah. And you know that actually having a podcast is very time consuming, and it's a commitment. Yeah. But you can still find it. Like all the episodes are up on any platform, Apple Podcasts, Podbean, and Spotify, for example, just to name a few. You can find the Honest Uproar also has an Instagram profile, which is the Honest Uproar. And then there's Childfree Girls. It's Childfree Girls everywhere as well. You know, we're on Instagram, we're on Facebook, YouTube. You can find us at Childfree Girls, and also on podcast platforms. Great. So do you have any final words of advice for someone who maybe is on the fence or unsure or child-free curious? Well, I think just the fact that you're questioning yourself about this choice is something that I commend. I mean, I'm very proud of you that you're actually thinking about this, because having a child is a life-changing decision. Yeah. And not having a child is also a life-changing decision. So taking the time to find the resources, taking the time to ask questions, taking the time to read. There's a lot of good literature out there and a lot of accounts of people who are actually also striving to bring awareness to this choice. And then also know that the only person who can answer that question for you, whether you want to be a parent or not, is yourself. Like nobody else should be making that decision for you. And that's definitely something that I applaud.
Excellent. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Holly, for having me. It was a pleasure.
Really great to talk with you again, so thank you very much. Please drop me a line and let me know what you thought of this week's episode. You can email me at holly@hollywharton.com or find me online and get in touch there. If you enjoyed this episode, you might want to check out these related episodes. So I've got episode 367, where I talk about finding yourself through solo travel and outdoor adventures. Episode 366, Joanna Hennon and I talk about midlife, reevaluating where you are and where you want to go. In episode 365, I talk about how to keep life simple. 317, I talk about knowing yourself and how to answer the question of where am I going. Episode 316, I talk about knowing yourself and how to answer the question of where am I. Episode 315, I talk about knowing yourself and how to answer the question of who am I. So that those three questions, who am I, and where am I going, that's a podcast series and have a lot of blog posts on the topic. But I think knowing yourself is one of the most important skills to being able to live a happy, joy-filled life. And as we were talking, if you don't know yourself, sometimes you might end up following the world's default lifestyle rather than the lifestyle that you actually want. So I encourage you to get to know yourself. Also, I'm finally accepting applications for podcast guests. As you may have noticed, I've got a lot of guests on lately. So if you're interested in being a guest, or if you know someone who would be perfect for the show, head over to hollywharton.com/pitch. That's PITCH, and fill out the form there. And again, if you know someone, please send them the link. And thank you very much. And thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this podcast, please leave a quick review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts. Remember to visit hollywharton.com/427 for the show notes on this episode. Happy trails to you. Thanks so much for listening to Into the Woods with Holly Wharton. You can find more information about today's episode, including links for topics that were discussed, at hollywharton.com. That's HOLLYWORTON.com. If you'd like to connect with other listeners and get support on your journey, I would love for you to join my private community on Patreon. That's patreon.com/Holly Wharton. That's patreon.com/Holly Wharton. Thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to seeing you next week.